Well, good Monday morning, everyone. I'm glad you tuned in. We're going to talk about a very important topic this week. Maybe, in fact, if I were to ask you, what are the meaningful things in your life? I don't know if you'd say it's the most meaningful, but you might. What would you say to that? The most important thing in your life? Not the Lord, but, well, anyway, you might not guess it. But I think you'll agree with me. And that's our grandchildren. Our grandchildren. There's so little, if you're blessed to have grandchildren. Now you might not be, but there might be other children in your life that we're going to talk about principles of passing on our faith, being intentional Christian grandparents. And it's a great reminder. Not that any of us can do all the things that we're going to talk about this week, and some just won't apply, and maybe yours kids are longer distance away, and it takes different actions on our part to impact their life. But the one thing that this week will do is remind us that it is not an accident who those children are. And right now, they're pretty active in my life. I'm so thankful. That was not always the case. They used to live in Germany, and always, a couple times, maybe once a week, we got to see them on Zoom. And it's so much better now. But the responsibility has not changed. Someone once said that the Christian faith is just one generation away from extinction. When you think about it, it's true. We need to be passing along our faith to our kids, our grandkids, and of course, evangelism in the world, which is the greater church, the whole church's responsibility. But I really feel that our responsibility is first to our family. Why do I say that? I'm on good grounds of saying that because it's in the Bible. It's in the Bible. Listen to a couple of, may I read a couple of verses to you this morning? Psalm 78, verse 4 says this. That we are to tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders that he has done. We're to be the ones. We're to be the ones to tell of the deeds of the Lord. And we'll talk more about that, but wow, especially the things that he has done in our life. The next generation and the next generation need to know what he has done in your life and in my life. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9 is even more specific. When Moses charges the people, he says, teach this law to your children and to their children after them. Who are their children after them? That's our grandkids. That's our grandkids. Boy, that is a heavy responsibility. But if we're to do it, we ought to do it the best we know how to do. Don't you agree? So we're going to talk about principles. Today is kind of just a general overview and a challenge that we've got to sharpen our skills, do things intentionally. It is an absolute lie of the world or a lie of Satan that says we ought to just let things go and let them decide for themselves. Uh, Well, each person does have to decide for themselves, but how do they get the correct information about Christianity if not from you? And or if not from maybe your kids telling their kids. Just being in a youth group is not enough. I know I've told my testimony here many a time that I would not be a believer today, humanly speaking, if not for my grandmother. She always took me to church. You know what? All my growing up days and I spent so very, very many weekends with her. Uh, there was not peace in my home much of the time, and they were willing to drive to get me. I lived in the San Gabriel Valley and she lived on the beach at Newport. I wanted to be there. So I spent many a weekend. And I wanted to be out sailing or swimming or doing everything, but never that I can remember was I allowed to talk her out of the fact that we would be going to church. And if you're from this area, you know it. We always went to St. Andrew's Presbyterian, right next to Newport Harbor High School. That was my story. And I always wanted her to hurry and get home and so I can be out swimming. We were like the last to leave church, it seemed like, at least. I couldn't talk her out of it. It was important. And it gave me a background. I wasn't thrilled about going, but you know what? It built the habit that going to church is important and nothing or should get in the way of it. And when people invite us out to lunch or something, it's got to be, well, sure, after church, because that's too important. I love the passage, though, in Second Timothy chapter 1. Paul writes to Timothy, who he's discipling, and he says to Timothy, your faith, Timothy, was first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice. Wow. He learned the faith from his grandmother Lois. Isn't that something? You know, Paul and Timothy traveled together and were huge in evangelizing Europe as we know it today. And he learned his faith not from Timothy, but from his grandmother. His grandmother. Friends, you and I are in an influential position if we have grandchildren. Maybe, maybe I'm talking about great-grandchildren in your life. And I know that some of us have so many, it's hard to even be a part of that. But I'm just going to challenge you to pray overnight. One thing we can do is take them to good movies. And we're having a movie showing on Tuesday night of a movie called The Great Awakening, which I'm told, is outstanding. And so I want you to see this preview right now. And then tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about it. Enjoy this preview of The Great Awakening.
You were friends with a preacher? Was he part of the revolution?
George Whitefield was the revolution.
The Constitution needs to speak to the heart of these people.
My friends, let us not be asleep, but awake! Benjamin Franklin.
Reverend George Whitefield.
A match made in heaven.
Or just a deal made in a print shop.
Let us proclaim freedom to the captives!
You are the lightning bolt, George. I am just a lightning rod.
And who is the source, Ben?
One tiny candle illuminates 1,000.
Arise, O sleeper! Awaken!